Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News this week.
I just think we have come to a point where we have to understand that we need to legalize it and stop criminalizing.
While VP Kamala Harris says words never before spoken by a presidential candidate, former President Donald Trump preaches states' decriminalization and rescheduling. Plus, California launches the emergency order banning hemp products by their governor, Gavin Newsom, and in the same week, he signs a social club bill that will allow indoor consumption of cannabis and food, but no alcohol. And checking in on the courtroom, Cheech and Chong files suit on behalf of the hemp community to stop that California ban, and the U.S. Hemp Roundtable continues to pursue a temporary restraining order. Plus, Arkansas Secretary of State John Thurston rejects over 50,000 signatures collected by volunteers who all want to expand that state's existing medical cannabis laws. And now there's a question of whether that ballot question will even make the ballot. It will be decided by that state's Supreme Court. We'll talk with Normal's Morgan Fox about all of those developments on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, Pro Cannabis Media's weekly roundup of the news from the cannabis industry. I'm Alaina Pinto. Before we get to the news from the past week, a reminder to download the free PCMTV app from the App Store or Google Play. The QR code is displayed on the screen, and it takes you right there. Okay, our top story is about the battle for the White House. A few weeks ago, we paved the way for this issue by asking which candidate would be best for the industry. Now there is a clear choice, and once again, it will be up to the voters to decide whether they want former President Trump, who is for allowing states to make their own rules and for federal rescheduling and decriminalization, or Vice President Kamala Harris, who now wants full legalization. And she said that on a podcast called All the Smoke, hosted by two former Golden State Warriors, and she came out for full legalization.
All right, so we're running short on time.
Okay.
We're going to finish up with quick hitters. First thing to come to mind, let us know. Oh, cannabis?
What are your views on cannabis?
I just feel strongly people should not be going to jail for smoking weed. And we know historically what that has meant and who has gone to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I just think we have come to a point where we have to understand that we need to legalize it and stop criminalizing this behavior. And I've actually, this is not a new position for me. I have felt for a long time we need to legalize it. So that's where I am on that.
I love it.
Well,
Okay.
She said weed, not cannabis. Pay attention, y'all.
Yeah, that's old school, right?
Yeah, that's old school.
I like it. I like it. All right.
I loved it.
This is the first time VP Harris has said directly to America that she is for cannabis legalization. In the past, she has advocated for changing the laws within the system, but with just under a month to go until the election, the legal weed card has been played. Florida remains the battleground state over cannabis. The Question 3 initiative for adult use there has driven over $100 million in ad revenues into the Florida media. Here's the latest ad from Smart and Safe Florida that shares the differences and the conflicts with many politicians playing that weed card.
I think in terms of marijuana, and legalization, I think that should be a state issue, state by state.
The way they're doing it in Florida, I think, is going to be actually good. It's going to be very good.
People should not be going to jail for smoking weed. We need to legalize it and stop criminalizing this behavior.
Should be a state's issue. States should make these decisions. Second, I don't want anybody going to prison for smoking a joint.
People who are 18, 19, 20 years old who had a conviction around cannabis, who have lived exemplary lives and were simply trying to be licensed in, whether it be a nurse or a teacher, a police officer. They were trying to do these things, and that was keeping them from being able to do that.
We know how our Florida correspondent Jeff Aker feels about all this, and PCM founder Jimmy Young talked to the Florida resident this week.
Florida has always been a battleground when it comes to politics in the United States. No different this coming election, with the Sunshine State having one of the most explosive ballot questions on that particular ballot in Florida. I'm Jimmy Young, the PCM founder. I'm joined by Jeff Aker, our master gardener and Florida correspondent. And Jeff, first of all, what's the atmosphere? What's the buzz on the street down there in Florida? Do you think this thing's going to pass?
Jimmy, I'm really pushing it hard through all my friends and family, and I encourage everyone in Florida that's watching us right now to follow suit. I know it's not a perfect bill, Jimmy, but it's a start. It's easier to change than get something back in. We got $105 million to the yes in this to even get it so we can dot the little circle.
There you go. Well, let's hope it happens. The Smart and Safe Florida campaign released a advertisement this week where it basically showed both sides of this issue, both presidential candidates and their vice president candidates alongside, and they all seem to be pulling for that yes on 3. Did you happen to see that? And what was your impression of that particular ad?
Okay, now what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing on this is Donald Trump has come out away from the Republican consensus that this is bad. All the Republicans in the state are like, oh, no. And the Democrats are, oh, yes, I think it's a huge voting point. The only difference I think it's going to make is Donald Trump is going to actually fill that little circle in
your
Florida.
State. In your state, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's voting for yes on 3. Kamala Harris isn't voting on it. So I'm thinking he's going to do more to it in the state than she is, just for that simple fact. And anyone that loves Trump, since he's doing it, he will carry them on to the vote too.
Right. And of course, your governor there, Ron DeSantis, is doing everything he can to stop the Yes on 3 movement. He aligned himself with the unregulated hemp-derived products. And I'm really I'm interested to see which side, if that has any impact at all. When you're around Florida, and you and I have talked, when you see beer for sale in convenience stores all the time, and of course you see a lot of the unregulated, unlicensed products in there too, don't you?
I don't see a lot in stores unless you go into some of the lower end gas stations. But just in my town alone, I have probably 6 what they call smoke shops.
Okay.
And they all carry Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 0, all that.
Yeah.
So they are all part of the hemp business.
Yeah.
And I think I've reported the hemp business in Florida has donated about $5 or $6 million to the no, because they don't want it, because it's going to take away from them.
No, it could end up shutting them down. In fact, if the federal government puts in a regulation about banning all those intoxicating hemp products too, it's going to have an impact on that industry by tenfold. So it's going to be a fascinating couple of months to keep an eye on. Is there any one county in particular, or any city in Florida that might be what do they call that? One way or another is going to, so goes that city, so goes Florida. Any idea?
Well, I think if you go to your big cities, your Miamis, your Tampa's, your Orlando's, your Tallahassee's, your Gainesville. I think overall, everyone supports it on the whole.
Okay, well, cool. And I love the fact that you're out there pushing for it and talking to as many people as you can, Jeff.
Well, thank you. I'm very passionate about it, as you can tell.
Absolutely.
I've been a cannabis smoker, and I want to do it legally. And I want to have safe product I could use.
Now we turn back to California, where once again it was a busy week for Governor Gavin Newsom, who is now facing a series of lawsuits while hemp lobbyists are trying to enact a restraining order. On top of all that negative news and movement, that same governor, Gavin Newsom, signed a law that will allow cannabis social clubs in the state. Lisa Battista is following everything going on in her state.
Comes to all things in California, we are so happy to have Lisa Battista on our side to kind of take a look at what's happening in her state. Lisa, a lot of crazy things going on in your state. I thought your editorial last week was perfect, and especially when you talked about the governor's emergency ban and the fact that now young people, kids who rely on CBD-derived products can't get their medicine. That, to me, should take the judge and allow that temporary restraining order to stand. But you tell me, what has been the reaction amongst your people out there in the beautiful state, the golden state of California?
Well, there's always something happening in California, that's for sure. There's a lot happening from day to day. I think the reaction to the hemp ban has been very interesting, right? It's been great to see the U.S. Hemp Roundtable and Cheech and Chong and several others come together to file lawsuits and to also ask for a temporary restraining order. What's nice is they're the companies. You take a Cheech and Chong, they're such a big brand and they have the funds to be able to fight the fight on behalf of all of the small businesses who really don't have it to fight for ourselves. I think it's also interesting, I'll just say from the risk perspective, right? Cheech and Chong, the brand is going to be there no matter what. And they, again, can take a little bit of risk from my perspective in fighting against the ban. Small businesses, small manufacturers like ourselves, we run a lot of risk. If we bump into those rules, if we get shut down, it's not just our business, it's all of the brands that we support. So it's just really weighing out those risk factors. And that's what I think is happening across the board. I'm hearing about many manufacturers who are looking out of state, just like we are. They have every intent to move. I hear plenty of others that are just going to run business as usual because they really don't think there's going to be much enforcement. It's debatable on if this is a, political stunt, might be a strong word, but are they really going to enforce it or are they not? It just continues to be a little crazy every day.
And the world of politics and law enforcement and lawmakers, it keeps us all with our opinions and our mouths and conversations going. And let's say the next week, after he put in his emergency order, Governor Newsom decides that he will be friends with the cannabis community and open up cafes. So they're going to they're actually going to have food and beverage, non-alcoholic, at these cannabis social cafes. Yes. And that's been how many years you've been waiting for that? Just out of curiosity.
Many.
Okay. Good answer. Because in Massachusetts, they're having public comment periods still 6 years after the voters put it in place. And all the regulators, 2 sets of regulators, can't figure out how to do this. And again, drives me crazy, but everything drives me crazy. So as a California resident, you're actually excited about that, aren't you?
Oh, I think again, this is a great example of something that makes common sense. If you're going to be able to, the fact that you can offer food in a consumption lounge, novel idea. Why wouldn't you be able to offer food, right? That seems very logical and again, common sense. So this is a great example of something that is a common sense regulation, a common sense law that's going into effect that's really going to help to support and normalize the industry. It's just is an interesting counterbalance to the things that are not common sense, but definitely excited about it. It's a long time coming and it's going to be interesting to see what establishments can do with that, right?
Next up, Joe Parsons in Virginia, where the medical market continues its steady growth, and Joe continues to find interesting people who have stories to tell.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection, and this is the Virginia Cannabis Report on Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Pro Cannabis Media wants to hear from you. We want to hear your cannabis story. So ever since we started this new campaign, I reached out on my social media to have people tell me what their cannabis story is. Lori, I want to say thank you very much for sharing your cannabis story and how you survived cancer. That is super awesome. So in what way for you has cannabis, since you have been in remission since 2022, made a positive impact in your life?
It just overall brings my pain down. I go through an enormous amount of pain day in and day out because my cancer did crush a sciatic nerve that leads down my right leg. So a lot of things that normal people can do, I cannot. And I experience pain that is unimaginable. And this helps me to bring that level down just a little bit more. And I tell people, please don't ever stop fighting for your beliefs. I struggled with wanting to do cannabis for quite some time. I struggled with it, and until I talked with, I talked with my kids, believe it or not. My kids are adult kids. I'm about to be a grandma.
Congratulations. Now, so you're saying that cannabis has definitely made a positive impact on your life, correct?
Yes. Without it,
would you recommend it for anyone else that is going through a similar ordeal such as yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, if you are struggling to accept, can I do this? Should I do this? Please try. I am so blessed that I have my medical marijuana card and that I have my cannabis to help me with my pain.
I agree.
And, I thank God every day for that. And this is all natural. And that's what I love. We are getting back to what nature has provided. And I would recommend it, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your story with us. If there's anybody else out there that wants to share their story with Pro Cannabis Media, all you got to do is head on over to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, download the free Pro Cannabis Media TV app, and you can share your story with us. Who knows, we might even be interviewing you next. So that's going to do it for this week from the Virginia Cannabis Connection and reporting from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
Adult use legalization bill that was filed a few weeks ago. The state has an existing medical program, but law enforcement is still making 32 cannabis possession arrests a day. Normal is now reporting that there are 800 cannabis possession arrests a day nationwide. Last week, we told you that the FBI reported that there were 223,000 total arrests in 2023 for nonviolent low-level possession crimes. In Oklahoma, over the past few years, a company called Mood Cannabis had been a model for any online businesses started 2 years after the 2018 Farm Bill. Their products were all derived from Delta 8 hemp, and the company that launched in 2020 was profitable last year thanks to the ability to sell across state lines, unlike the legally licensed industry. Now, sales have collapsed, and that company is laying off 120 employees. That'll do it for the A Block this week, but coming up, what impact has Ohio's adult use market had on Michigan? Well, sales are up in that state too, but not everything is perfect in the Great Lakes state. Prices are collapsing, but the market continues to buy more products than any other state. Amie Carter has that story, plus more state reports on Cannabis Coast to Coast News after this.
If you live in Michigan and want to make the most out of marijuana, you need a medical card. Let's dive into 5 awesome reasons why.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
In serene Springfield, Ohio, Ethan battles anxiety and persistent body pain. Seeking relief, he turns to Yellow Labs Calm THC Cream, offering tranquility via delivery technology. Massaging in the cream, Ethan feels waves of peace and serenity easing his anxiety and tension. Empowered by the remarkable relief, he sets out on a journey towards healing and renewal. Drawn to Yellow Labs' transformative offerings, The Calm THC cream becomes a beacon of comfort, soothing both his physical and emotional pain.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the B Block, or our second part of our weekly roundup of industry moves. Another reminder that you can get the show on demand every week on our app, PCM TV, available at the App Store and Google Play. First up in the B Block is Amie Carter, one of the founders of the Michigan Weedsters and one of that state's leading advocates for change.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters for this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. From pickles to wellness, the Michigan family behind the largest pickle brand in the U.S., Vlasic Pickles, is set to launch Vlasic Labs, located in Commerce Township, which makes CBD products for both pets and humans. Redford, Michigan, dozens of hopeful entrepreneurs have reportedly been setting up tents outside Redford Township Hall for several days, hoping to be among the first to apply for a local license to operate a cannabis business in that area. Retail market blues. According to recent reports from Crane's Detroit Business, Michigan's remarkably low marijuana prices, averaging around 80 per ounce, are likely influenced by a considerable surge of illegal and unregulated marijuana entering the legal market. Doobie Act, a bill that passed a U.S. Senate committee in September, would allow individuals applying for federal government jobs to no longer be disqualified solely due to previous marijuana use. Dubbed the Doobie Act and introduced by U.S. Senator Gary Peters out of Michigan, the legislation still requires approval from both the Senate and the House before it can be enacted into law. Has a flame dimmed for cannabis retail in Traverse City? Officials at Michigan cannabis companies have indicated that they anticipate additional dispensaries in Traverse City may shut down as supply continues to exceed demand in the tourist destination, especially with 10 dispensaries operating during the colder months. That's this week's Michigan Report. I'm Amie Carter for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
If you live in Michigan and want to make the most out of marijuana, you need a medical card. Let's dive into 5 awesome reasons why. First, cost savings. Lower taxes mean more money in your pocket. Second, higher purchase limits. Medical card holders can buy and possess more, perfect for chronic conditions. Third, quality, potent products. Designate a caregiver to assist in meeting your needs for your medical conditions. Fourth, age requirements. Access is available for all ages, even minors, with the right consent and caregiver support. Finally, legal protections. More workplace and housing rights, and your card can be a legal defense in court. Head to MichiganWeedsters.com, click the link, and talk to a doctor from home for just $90, including the state fee. Your temporary card arrives via email right away. Remember to put Michigan Weedsters in the drop-down when asked how you heard about us. Together, we grow.
You might remember that Arkansas was one of the states working on getting a cannabis reform question on the ballot. Our man in the Razorback state, Kevin Shakir, interviewed a volunteer worker who explained that he was collecting signatures in order to get the reform question on the ballot. Well, now there's a snag and a lawsuit. The campaign had collected 150,000 signatures in support of the initiative, but the Secretary of State only certified 88,000 of the 90,000 required. So the ballot question is off. Arkansans for Patient Access was the group out in the streets trying to collect the signatures. And now that the question has been pulled from the ballot, falling just 2,000 names short. The lawsuit claims, though, that the Secretary of State, John Thurston, used a narrow interpretation about who was responsible for collecting the signatures and basically omitted thousands collected by volunteers. Thurston claims that the law states these signatures had to be collected by the sponsor of the question, not volunteers. Did you know that there is an award show for cannabis music? Well, not only is there one, but it's the 6th year of this unique category for the cannabis industry. Of course, the awards show was in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Tina Tasaka found some new friends.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. There's more growing news for the Minnesota tribes as they actively expand operations. Minnesota cannabis businesses are nearing the final phase of securing licenses for 2024, but tribal operations could give them early competition. Sean Weber of Crested River plans to expand into marijuana with his current hemp business, but nearby tribal businesses with the Lower Sioux Reservation may be up and running first. Tribes are negotiating with the state to open dispensaries off reservations, adding to the competition. Zach Wilson of Wobigwan, Mesquite, and White Earth Nation Cannabis sees opportunity for collaboration rather than crowding as tribal and state-regulated businesses launch. Licensing starts late this year, with retail openings expected by March. In Nevada, at the September 19th meeting, the Cannabis Compliance Board approved MedMin's transfer of interest to Mint, Nevada. However, Mesa Oils and Redwood Cultivation initially sought to halt the transfer until they were paid what they were owed. Just before the transfer of interest discussion, MedMin's Nevada's chief restructuring officer announced a deal had been reached to pay these creditors upon the transaction's completion. Mint, based in Tempe, Arizona, operates 18 dispensaries across states like Arizona, Michigan, Illinois, Missouri, and is expanding into Nevada and Florida. And lastly, coming fresh off the Nevada Cannabis Music Awards Festival, and I had to say that about 10 times, maybe 100, the results and winners are in. I wish I could mention everyone and every category because everyone in this industry works so hard and so many deserve to be on that stage. Some of the highlights include Best Hybrid Flower, Head Cheese, Polaris. Best Indica Flower, Master X, Bubba Kush, Polaris. Best Vape, Rove. Rick Simpson Oil, Permanent Marker, RSO, by Grower Circle. All in all, it was a fun-tastic night with high energy, and the Chamber of Cannabis was there with new board members. And at the end of the night, Party Man Live, they busted in. Here tonight at the Cannabis Awards here in Nevada.
Well, we are Party Man Live, entertainment out of Vegas. We do DJ and mascot parties. We do any party. All parties matter. But anyway, we came to celebrate the cannabis. We came to listen to the good music, vibe with the good people, and have a great time.
And that was a great interview. I'm Tina Tasaka with Nevada and Tribal News, and this is Pro Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Many new adult use states tend to oversaturate the market with people and groups that apply for licenses, but the oversaturation of the market has hurt many new markets. Now this week, regulators in Vermont have stopped accepting any new cannabis retail and some cultivation applications for licenses. The move is to curb the problem of retail saturation. There are 79 dispensaries in the Green Mountains state and just over 12,000 in the country. There are 292 dispensaries in Arizona, but our regular Arizona reporter Karen Black is on vacation this week. One of the most vocal advocates in that state is Allison Benedict, and she is filling in for Karen. She's also coming off a brilliant appearance on Montel Williams' podcast, Let's Be Blunt. Here's Allison.
I'm Allison Benedict from Pause Consumption, filling in for Karen Black with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Let's dive into some of the top related stories this week. A recent ruling by the Arizona Court of Appeals brings some clarity to cannabis and driving laws. The court ruled that drivers who use cannabis aren't automatically guilty of a DUI just because they tested positive for marijuana. The decision highlights that impairment needs to be proven, not just the presence of THC in someone's system. This is an important ruling as it addresses the complexity of determining impairment, considering how long THC can stay in the body after use. In California, cannabis lounges are setting a new standard for social consumption. A recently passed law allows licensed dispensaries to serve food and host live music events, creating a more immersive experience for patrons. This shift not only elevates cannabis culture, but also provides a safe and controlled environment for consumption. It's a model that could inspire other states, like Arizona, where consumption lounges are not yet legal, allowing regulated social spaces for cannabis use, along with entertainment and dining, could help address concerns about public consumption and bring cannabis further into the mainstream. States looking to enhance both public safety and the customer experience should take note of California's approach. And back here in Phoenix, something unexpected is turning heads. A large naked statue of Donald Trump has been placed near a dispensary in central Phoenix. It's causing quite the stir. The art piece is a throwback to a series of similar statues that popped up around the U.S. in 2016. The statue has already sparked conversation and debate, and many are wondering, how long will it remain on display? That's all for this week's Arizona Cannabis Report. I'm Allison Benedict from Pause Consumption, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now we turn to the Lone Star State of Texas, where hemp-derived products dominate the market. There are cities and towns protesting the governor's anti-cannabis stance by voting to decriminalize possession, with Austin already implementing their own laws. And now the question is, what are they going to do with all the hemp-derived Delta-8 products? They sell like hotcakes in Texas, with the feds now working on an FDA-controlled set of regulations. The Texas State Supreme Court might rule before the feds even have their bill passed. Here's our Lone Star State correspondent, Lisa Williams.
I'm Lisa Williams, founder of the Toke Agency, bringing you the Texas Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Howdy, howdy, y'all. Texas is heating up again in the hemp world, and this time stakes are higher than ever. The Texas Supreme Court is set to decide on a 2021 lawsuit challenging the state's attempt to ban Delta-8 THC. If they rule against it, it could really shake up the entire hemp market here in Texas. For now, businesses are operating under an injunction, but that protection could vanish. Cynthia Carrera from the Texas Hemp Business Council says this case goes beyond just Delta-8. It could really impact all hemp-derived cannabinoids. And this just isn't about numbers. It's personal. Veterans are stepping up, saying they rely on hemp for relief. And if the ban goes through, they will be left with nothing. Add to that fact that Texas's medical marijuana program is so restrictive, with only 12,000 registered patients, that many Texans are turning to hemp products instead of dealing with the red tape. On top of that, economist Bo Whitney says hemp brings in major tax revenue. An estimated $8 billion impact in 2022, with $6 billion coming from direct sales alone. This makes the Texas hemp market a powerful economic force, but it's under threat as legislatures and businesses fight over who controls the market. With a decision expected in 2025, the battle isn't over. And trust me, whichever way this goes, Texans won't be given up without a fight. This is also personal to me, as I just acquired a brand called Hello Again Products, which is currently manufactured in California. And with the California hemp market entirely shut down, I'm looking to bring the manufacturing to Texas. But it seems like this might be a wait and see what happens with this new legislation. I'm Lisa Williams, founder of the Toke Agency, bringing you the Texas Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the B block of Cannabis Coast to Coast News for the week. But we still have more reports and news for you, including our Canadian report with Debbie Facey and Doug Miller is high on Wall Street, so don't go away.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Be Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Facey with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, Pro Cannabis Media's weekly roundup of the news from the industry. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. The guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind.
Welcome back to the C Block, or last section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. If you want to keep up on the latest news in the industry, you should download our free app, PCM TV. Yes, it's available at the App Store or Google Play, and the QR code on the screen will take you right there. Then you will be able to get this show on demand starting on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Plus, you will find many of the best of news and talk shows Pro Cannabis Media has produced over the past 3 years. One guy who's been reporting for us for 2 years is our master day trader, Doug Miller, who is high on Wall Street.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Specialty marijuana finance company Silver Spike Investment Corp has closed on a portfolio of loans and changed its name to Chicago Atlantic BDC. Silver Spike said in February it planned to acquire Chicago Atlantic loan portfolio. The the combined company has elected to be regulated as a business development company and will trade on the NASDAQ stock exchange as LIEN. Silver Spike previously traded on the NASDAQ as SSIC. With the acquisition, Chicago Atlantic has net assets of roughly $300 million and investments in 28 portfolio companies. Let's see how LIEN is doing on the stock charts. It's trading around $11.90 and it jumped up on this news. So watch for some pullback as it sets back up to go up more. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast, I'm Doug Miller.
Debbie Lacey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis Report. So what we have in Canada this week is the Green Tone Company in Quebec, as well as the Salem Technology. They are going to be pairing up together and creating a collaboration when it comes to a new light system. This light system is going to be something that is going to be beneficial to not only the Quebec cultivation sector, but it's also going to be presenting and creating a little bit more of a different way for us to be growing and cultivating when it comes to a lot of the LPs out there and are needing a little bit more of a boost. Next, what we have is a decline when it comes to the cannabis usage in 2022 versus 2023. We saw a overall decline of 6.9 million in 2023 from 7.1 million in 2024. In 2022, sorry. This is something that we have seen, especially when it comes to the market and the pricing, due to the fact that the overall over the 5 years has been something that we have been trying to, I want to say, fix. But at the moment in time, we are seeing a rise in vapes. So vapes as in tobacco. So hopefully we could steer them clear from that and be a little bit more token friendly. Last but not least, we have the Globe and Mail, which is one of our newspapers here in Toronto, Ontario. They have done their most popular brands, as in all of Canada, and 4 of our Canadian brands made that list. So one of them was Sundial, the other was Q&1, the third one was Event Brands, and the last one was High Tide, which are all great brands, especially due to the fact that we have them all throughout Canada and Ontario, and that's just a boost when it comes to positivity in our sector. So this is Debbie Lacey with the Cannabis Coast to Coast, the Coast to Coast Cannabis Report News. Have a great one. Peace.
In Colorado, which along with Washington State were the first 2 states to legalize adult use of cannabis, now 12 years later, neither state has become a role model for other states, and now tax revenues are down in Colorado. Here's Xavier Gillet with more from Colorado.
This is Xavier Gillet. I am the chair of the Colorado chapter of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce and a non-attorney professional with the McDonald Hopkins law firm. I'm also the Colorado correspondent for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm excited to be bringing to you guys all 2 stories this week out of the Colorado region that I think our viewers will find relevant. The first one, in a headline that I think is going to come as no surprise to many seasoned cannabis professionals, is that Colorado's tax revenue year over year has continued to decline, specifically sourced from cannabis, of course. Now, overall tax revenue, I'm not going to comment on that. But the cannabis-derived tax revenue has declined over the last 3 years or so. And I think there's really 2 reasons for that. And that is, first, the pandemic, COVID, really spurned kind of a craze, let's say, of consumption. Dispensaries and cannabis businesses were named essential businesses. They were allowed to remain open, continue serving the public. And in turn, I think they got used to perhaps a bit of an inflated, yearly or monthly throughput when it comes to consumers in the space. So we're seeing a decline from that. And the second piece I think that contributes to the declining tax revenue is the fact that so many new markets have continued to open up across the United States. Colorado and Washington were once, targets for cannatourism or other forms of tourism or travel that perhaps did factor in or consider the fact that there was recreational cannabis access here in the state. So it'll be interesting to see how this levels out, but I do think it's also endemic of the, perhaps onerous regulations that cannabis operators are subjected to here in Colorado, and a reminder that overregulation, especially overtaxation, does not necessarily kill black market and illicit activities, and instead encourages consumers to continue purchasing their cannabis products from those sources. Now, second piece of news I want to bring to your attention is that Colorado Springs, the large urban area south of Denver, largest, second largest, let's say, metropolitan area in Colorado, if you can call it that, is considering allowing recreational cannabis. Since 2014, since the state passed recreational cannabis access, Colorado Springs has actually declined to allow recreationally licensed cannabis businesses within city limits. There's no recreational dispensaries, no recreational cultivators or processors in the city limits. So it'll be interesting to see if that measure is approved. We expect to learn more about that in the coming months. Now, one thing that's sure is that city officials have already indicated that they will be issuing very limited license counts, and they've established zoning regulations already, for example, prohibiting dispensaries from being within a 1 mile radius of any school serving a K through 12 student population. So exciting times to see, potentially another large population begin to gain access to recreational cannabis here in Colorado, which again, may be a surprise to some of our viewers. But also a bit of a downturn when it comes to tax revenue of the state, mostly because of pandemic highs returning to normal, Canada tourism being down, but then again also a reminder that onerous regulations are not always the best choice, and they may in fact drive consumers back to the illicit market. That's it for this week. I'm excited to come to bring you more stories next week, and thank you all for tuning in.
Back here on the East Coast, the Washington District of Columbia is now suing to stop the illegal operations that are popping up in the shadow of the Capitol. Andrew Behringer has more on what's going on in our nation's capital.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. House Democrats urged the DEA to expedite cannabis rescheduling in a significant move for cannabis policy at the federal level. 2 House Democrats are pressing for updates regarding the rescheduling of cannabis. The representatives have called on the DEA Administrator Ann Milgram to take swift action in rescheduling cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. Now, if we remember, the DEA began this process in early May, opening a public comment period that saw overwhelming support for this change. The agency has scheduled a hearing for December 2nd, just weeks after this upcoming presidential election. This timing adds a layer of political intrigue to an already contentious issue. The call for action reflects growing bipartisan momentum for cannabis reform at the federal level. Now, if we look at DC local news, a coalition of licensed cannabis businesses in Washington, D.C. have filed a federal lawsuit against 24 illicit cannabis operators. The Alliance of Legal Cannabis Entities, or ACLE, is taking aim at unlicensed dispensaries, their owners, and landlords, accusing them of unfair competition and false advertising. The lawsuit alleges that these illicit operators have diverted over $600 million annually from the legal market, forcing several licensed businesses to shut down. Now, despite these warnings from the city officials, these shops continue to operate under the Initiative 71's gifting model, which the city has deemed illegal for commercial purposes. The suit also claims many of these shops are advertising interstate delivery, both clear violations of local and federal laws. The ACLE is seeking damages equal to 3 times the profits received by each defendant over the past 3 years. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now with the presidential race in its final month, plus Senator Ron Wyden's bill to regulate hemp, there is a lot on the plate of the political director for NORML, Morgan Fox. He talked with PCM founder Jimmy Young this week.
We've got a very special guest on our Cannabis Coast to Coast News one-on-one this week. It is Morgan Fox, the political director of NORML. And Morgan, As the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, I'm certainly happy to be talking to you this morning. Lots going on down there in Washington, D.C., isn't there?
Well, thanks for having me as always, Jimmy. Yeah, I mean, in some aspects, there's a lot going on. In other aspects, there's really nothing going on. We're entering into campaign season, which means that, since the Congress was able to narrowly avoid a government shutdown, now we're in a point where all eyes are on the elections, and I think it's very unlikely that we're going to see any real legislative movement in the next couple of weeks. But we have seen some movement leading up to this point, and I think that it is positioning us very, very well for the post-election period when, I think it's anybody's guess what could happen, and I think it's largely dependent on the results of both the presidential as well as congressional elections. But that's really going to change the dynamic in terms of what sort of cannabis-related legislation we might be able to see in the remainder of the 118th. And then it's also going to change the dynamic about how preparations are being made for the 119th Congress.
Yeah, and as a lame duck Congress, I'm not quite sure in this current environment that's going to be, they're not going to be very busy, let's just say. Am I accurate on that, you think?
I think it's anybody's guess. Congress could be very, very busy in a number of different ways. I mean, who knows if it's going to be cannabis related? But I do know that, from my conversations with lawmakers, that there is appetite to continue moving standalone cannabis policy reform across the finish line. Obviously, we're going to have to be talking about another round of appropriations, but I think it's much more likely that we're going to get another continuing resolution and push the entire conversation around appropriations issues into the FY25 negotiations. That could be really, really good for cannabis policy reform. But again, we don't know what the political environment is going to look like around those conversations. So it's very difficult to predict.
Right. Oh, that's for sure. And I'm not even sure I've got so many questions I want to start with. But since we're already leaning into that direction a little bit, there is definitely both sides of the aisle candidates are all basically saying they're supporting the Yes on 3 adult use ballot initiative. The Safe and Smart Florida folks put out a recent advertisement basically showing former President Trump and Vice President Harris's policy. And also it was released this week where you have Kamala Harris on the NBA Players podcast looking at not looking at the camera, but looking at the host of the show and saying, I think it should be legalized. It really is, I think, the first time I've ever heard a presidential candidate use those words. Is that accurate?
Oh, unfortunately, far from. Well, I mean, fortunately for us, Harris in the 2020 campaign said the exact same thing and came out strongly in favor of legalization and decriminalization. Harris also, as a senator, sponsored the MORE Act on the Senate side, which would have descheduled cannabis and regulated it in a fashion. And I think that while, as far as I know, none of the candidates for president or vice president have officially endorsed Amendment 3, they've all made relatively supportive comments about legalization. Only one of them really has a track record that supports those statements. But at the same time, I think that it's really, really important that we're in a position now where, like, the two major party candidate groups are all saying the same thing, that cannabis prohibition needs to end and that people should not be jailed for using cannabis. I think that there's also a significant amount of support for providing states with a fair amount of self-determinism, but also when you look at really what people are saying in terms of policy, having some sort of federal guidelines. But in terms of just what the candidates have said, everybody is united in that people shouldn't be arrested for cannabis. That is fairly historic. I think that a lot of other politicians down ticket in every single race should really be paying attention to that and thinking about their positions. Not just from a political point of view, but from the simple truth that prohibition is a failure and that continuing to support failed policies is bad for your constituents. It's bad for you politically, and it's bad for our country.
Right. That's great. Absolutely. And, I think back to the Farm Bill of 2018 and the Pandora's box that was opened when the Congress allowed hemp at 0.3% defined. And that too is under attack lately. And now we have this cottage industry, if you will, of Delta 8 products that are designed to attract younger people to them, unregulated, unlicensed, and they're available at gas stations, convenience stores, and smoke shops. And at least now there is someone in our government who recognized that, you know what, we got to do the job that the Farm Bill wanted the FDA to do when they first passed it, but they never did anything over the last 6 years. So let's talk a little bit about Senator Wyden's bill. And is that a helpful thing at this point?
So Senator Wyden introduced a bill that would more or less regulate intoxicating cannabinoids, regardless of their source of derivation, whether it's from cannabis or hemp. But these are specifically focused on products that have been an outgrowth of the hemp industry, really. There was no legislative intent for intoxicating cannabinoids, et cetera. So the thing about the Wyden bill, though, is that it actually does not regulate synthetics. It regulates hemp-derived products. And I think that that's a really big difference because the vast majority of Delta 8 products out there, I would say like 99.99999%, are synthesized from CBD that was itself derived from hemp. So the Wyden bill would not, enshrine those sort of products with any sort of protection. And in fact, despite a lot of claims in the hemp industry that the Farm Bill legalized these, there was certainly no indication of legislative intent around that. And the DEA has said on several occasions that no, these products are not legal. That being said, we have seen federal courts that said, yes, they are legal because of the Farm Bill. So it's a pretty confusing place that is, I think, really in need of legislative clarification, as well as regulatory control on the part of the FDA and other federal agencies. I think that the recognition of this, because there have been good actors in the space, but there have been a lot of bad actors in this space, as you mentioned, people that are selling like garbage bathtub products that are being produced by people with no knowledge of chemistry, right. That are being slapped into mass-produced packaging that's got cartoon characters on it, and that is masquerading as licensed and regulated and tested cannabis products. We see a proliferation of these products in places that don't do any sort of ID testing. And so I think that there's a universal understanding that there needs to be some form of regulation.
And finally, tonight, one dispensary in Massachusetts is making a difference during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It's Netta in Brookline, Franklin, and Northampton. So what is Netta doing? They are selling strawberry-flavored pre-rolls called Pink Rosé. So not only do you get a fruity flavor with your pre-roll, but Netta is donating $1 to the Susan B. Komen Foundation for Breast Cancer. That's called socially responsible capitalism, and this industry continues to develop more ways to give back to the community in addition to the crippling taxes and regulations that they are required to follow. It's not easy in the cannabis world. That'll do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Remember to download our free app. And like we always say, it's a whole new world of weed out there. I'm Alaina Pinto, reminding you to use it responsibly. We'll see you next time.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Be Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Fazy with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, Pro Cannabis Media's weekly roundup of the news from the industry. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.